Hi everybody, I'm Eric Bolden, and this is Music Theory Video number 1, Modal Characteristics. Let me state up front that the ideas presented here are solely my own ideas. And I say that not to take credit, but to make it clear that I do not represent any institution. And if you have a disagreement with me or my ideas, and that's very likely, then you may send me a message. Try not to call me an idiot, but send me a message, we'll discuss it and try to figure this thing out. All right, what is a mode? Many people think a mode is a scale. They wouldn't be wrong. Modes are scales. A scale is a group of notes from one octave within an octave. We practice scales. Scales are theoretical. Modes are more than just scales. Modes are how those notes are used with each other in combination. How the notes of the mode are used to create a characteristic sound. And that's what we're going to discuss here, the characteristics of each mode. So the first modes we're going to discuss are the major modes and the Ionian mode. Now I did mention there'd be some controversy, and here it is. There's a difference between the major mode and the Ionian mode. There's no difference in the scale. The scale is the same, the major scale. Now I should mention that this video is not about what scales to play over what chords. That's not the purpose here. The purpose here is to identify the characteristic sounds of each mode. Now, you might be able to use that in your improvisation, but really this is not a jazz video per se, although some of the music that we'll look at is jazz. All right, so many modes are definable by the sound of one chord, and the major mode is definable simply by the sound of the major chord. Now you can also play the add 9 chord, major 6 chord, major 6-9 chord, any type of pentatonic sound. I'm not the greatest piano player, but this is the sound of the major mode. Normally you hear this, pop music, classical music. Now even inversions, are in the major mode. That's the major mode. So what's the difference between the major mode and the Ionian mode? The Ionian mode is the sound of the major 7th chord. That one note makes the difference. Now I'm giving you some chords here that revolve around that. That's the sound of the Ionian mode. It's different than the major mode. Now, some may say that this could be the Lydian mode. Yes, but we need more information to make it the Lydian mode. I'm getting ahead of myself here, but that's the Lydian mode. All right, that, the Ionian mode. So the Dorian mode is one of the 3 minor modes. And it's the only one of the 3 minor modes that is recognizable and definable by one chord. And that chord is this. This is a D minor 6 chord. However, the 6th is a major 6. That's the note that is characteristic of the Dorian mode. This chord was popular, still is, in the 40s though. You've got Night in Tunisia. Then you've got Caravan by Duke Ellington. Uses that sound. And this also is like a pop, it came back in the 80s. Jimmy Jam, Janet Jackson, I don't know the name of the song. but that sound became kind of had a resurgence in the 80s. But there's a lot more to the Dorian mode. Now, when you play just a minor seventh, really technically you're not defining the Dorian mode just with that chord. However, when I hear a minor seventh or a ninth, I'm kind of drawn to the sound of the Dorian mode, because when people comp over this kind of a chord, generally what they're going to play is something like this. So I'm just playing a G down to F, and then here that's a G6 or E minor 7 down to the D minor 7. It all started here. Let's see. Right? So What by Miles Davis. These are the Bill Evans chords. I'm just going down a whole step. So that would be called an E minor 11 with no 9. And that right there is the characteristic sound of the Dorian mode. So the Phrygian mode is not really definable by one chord. That's not really a chord that anybody ever uses in music. It's not a sound that I'm familiar with in any way. I suppose you could write a song. This would be called E minor 7 flat 9. It's not really usable. But the Phrygian mode is an ancient mode, and it needs more than just one chord to establish its sound. And it's very simple. I'm going to play an F over E. This is an F triad, and I'm just going to resolve it down there, and that right there shows you the Phrygian mode. Now, Spanish music. I can just keep the E in the bass, and it works. And then we've got stuff like now, it doesn't have to be an F triad. I can go. You know, these modes come from ancient times when before there was even chords. So, I mean, there were chords, but they didn't call things, you know, F triad and the stuff that we label it today. That's Western. So, you know, the Greeks in ancient music could use any combination of notes to reach their desired sound. That's the Phrygian mode. The Lydian mode is one of the 4 major modes. That's right, 4. Because you have the major mode and the Ionian mode, which we've talked about. There's now the Lydian and the Mixolydian all have a major third. The Lydian mode can be established with one chord. It would be this. So all I'm playing here is a D triad over C, and that's the sound of the Lydian mode. Now it doesn't have to be a D triad. It can be any number of things that I can play here. The interesting thing about the Lydian mode is if I don't play this one note, this is the raised fourth. If I don't play that note, well, it doesn't sound Lydian anymore. Now it sounds major to me. Now I can return to that because I've kind of established that sound. But it's difficult. It's a difficult mode to write in because if you leave that note out, you're really not playing the Lydian mode anymore. That's an Ionian mode right there. Of course, that note is implied. Now, a lot of film music uses the Lydian mode. Let's see what we've got here. So, if you watch the show, he always You'll hear that a lot. Now that you know what it sounds like, you can listen for it. So that's a good example of music that's in the Lydian mode. However, when it doesn't have that note in it, it kind of takes it out of that mode. A lot of music also uses the Lydian sound within other progressions. For example, let's see, thinking of film music, we've got so right there's the sound of the Lydian mode. But then it goes right back to, so it doesn't stay in the Lydian mode, it just uses that sound. Now jazz music uses the Lydian mode quite a bit, particularly on like a last note. Here's just a 2-5-1, little tritone substitute. We've all heard that a million times. It's just a major 13, sharp 11, okay? And that's the Lydian sound. There are people that think that the Lydian mode is really like the root mode of all music. And here's why. If you build a chord starting on C symmetrically, major third, minor third, major third, minor third, there's that Lydian note. And we have a nice sounding consonant chord with all the notes of the scale. If I put F natural in there, it doesn't work. It's the 11th. Nobody ever plays that. So, but music did not develop that way, so we're stuck with the major key as home base. Okay, the Mixolydian mode is one of the major modes. It has a major third, but since it has a flat 7, it sounds like this. And obviously, that is the blues. The blues is interesting music because it was the first music to use that type of chord, the dominant 7th type of chord, which of course normally is the 5 chord, as the 1 chord and the 4 chord and the 5 chord, every chord. There's blues that uses only dominants. A lot of blues uses just dominant 7th types of chords. So that's G7, G9, G13. Those all tell us that this is the Mixolydian mode right there. Now there is symphonic music that uses the Mixolydian mode. I can't come up with any titles, but when I conducted and played in symphonic bands, a lot of that music that's written for schools and stuff, they use the Mixolydian mode. It's an exciting mode, and a lot of television and stuff. Let's see. That one, that's Mixolydian. That's Star Trek. So, yeah, and you kind of like, and I should also mention that the original blues music was not Mixolydian. It just was a major chord on the 1. Now when it went to the 4, then they started throwing things in there. And then on the last chord, that's when they first started throwing that 7th in there. So, and then nowadays, pretty much everybody playing modern blues plays the 7th. However, it's somewhat like the Lydian mode, and a lot of modes are like this, where they need that one note to really establish it. Without that note, I mean, I'm really just in a major key here until I hit that note. And a lot of progressions, like in the film music, you'll see things like this. Very simple, kind of a, this suspended kind of a sound, resolution. The Aeolian mode is one of the 3 minor modes, and you can't recognize it really by playing one chord. If you play just a minor chord, we don't know really if it's Aeolian or Dorian or Phrygian. We need a little more information there. Of course, the Aeolian mode is the natural minor, and I will say this is just my observation. if I hear just a minor triad, I'm tending to, it sounds to me like it's the Aeolian mode. And this goes back to classical music, where there's hundreds and thousands of examples of music in the natural minor mode. I'm just playing one chord below it, but you can see how that's the Aeolian mode right there. So kind of by default, if it's just a triadic kind of music tends to lean towards that Aeolian sound. Now, there's a B flat in this scale mode. And that's the note that makes it different from the Dorian mode. And when I say in a mode, and I should define what I mean by that, it doesn't necessarily mean that everything is in that mode and using those notes. But here we're trying to define the characteristic sounds of the mode. So you're going to have to make your own decisions as what to do. A lot of music, like here's an example of Aeolian mode in jazz. Now, this is not about soloing and what scales to use. The melody does use the Aeolian mode. However, when people solo on it, they can either use the Aeolian mode or the Dorian mode or the harmonic minor. They all work together. So, being in a mode is not necessarily a dogmatic thing. Okay, we made it this far. Now we're at the Locrian mode. I would say the Locrian mode is probably the most elusive mode. It is defined by one chord, and that is that chord right there. It's called the B half diminished seventh chord. And to me, when I hear that, it's certainly unstable. I don't know if there's any music that actually could be defined as being in the Locrian mode. I'm sure somebody's written some crazy jazz tune, but really, it's just a 2-chord from the minor key. All right. Now, there is music, like heavy metal music, actually, that uses the Locrian. It kind of sounds Locrian to me, not melodically, certainly, but some of their riffs use these kind of, I can't think of an example for you, but, the very dark sound of that mode. Anyway, there it is, and when you hear that, that's the Locrian mode. So now you've seen and heard all 8 modes and their characteristic sounds. So whenever you're playing music or listening to music, try to identify the mode that you're in and get to the piano, bang out chords like I do and try to create the sound of each mode and have fun with it.